Hello everyone and welcome to episode Finnigan of the Unparalleled Success Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Woods. It's been a while since we've done one of these. Episode Turris was released May 1st, so almost exactly 2 months since I had Corey Clouston on. But given the amount of time that has passed since that episode, that is fantastic for today's show as we have lots to talk about. Josh Primeau is my guest today. He is a graduate of the Algonquin College Radio Broadcasting Program, which is the same program I am currently a student in. He has been doing play-by-play and color commentary for years, covering the CCHL, most recently working with the Ottawa Junior Senators, who won the Bogart Cup in 2019, and he will be taking over as the lead broadcaster for the Nepean Raiders next season. So exciting times for him, and I'm excited to have him on the show today to talk about the Draft Lottery, which took place last Friday. Also, the Hall of Fame class of 2020 was unveiled last week as well, so we're going to talk about whether or not maybe a certain Senators legend is deserving of a spot in the Hockey Hall of Fame. We're going to talk about the Sens' new Sens On Demand and much more in episode Finnigan of the Unparalleled Success Podcast.
Alexi Yashin, Chris Phillips, Bogus, Smollett, Mike Fisher, Marion Hossa, Martin Havlat, Pizza Line, Ray Emery, Brian Murray, Redden, Lee Cowan, Smith, Neal, Fat by Guy Walrus, Chara, Heatley, Alfie all left the team, Andrew Hammond, Kyle Tursa, Benajat, Double D on Mark Stone, Carlson, Matt Duchesne, DeSingle, Hogberg, Shabata, Chuck, Unparalleled Success. We didn't start the rebuild, it was always brewing since 2009. We didn't start the rebuild, no we didn't start it, but this time we've got it.
Welcome to episode Finnigan of the Unparalleled Success Podcast. Very happy to have joining me on the show today, primetime Josh Primeau. How's it going?
It's going good, man. Been trying to stay busy during quarantine, but the draft lottery last weekend was nice to kind of feel like we were back in the real world almost.
I have lots of questions about the draft lottery. It was one of the most exciting events for us as Sens fans since I would say Game 7 against the Penguins, because the outcome of this year's lottery has so much at stake for the future of the franchise, a very pivotal event for the team.
Oh, absolutely. And, think about, 3 and 5 is not 1 and 2 for sure, which is like what every Sens fan is hoping for, but I'm actually pretty excited to see what the Sens can come away with, and I'd be interested to see what kind of plan they have for those spots, and I'm sure they've kind of game planned for the top 6 picks pretty much. So I'm excited to see what they're going to do.
And as you mentioned earlier, it was like one of the first times that we got back to the real world sort of thing. It was the first time that I had been over to a friend's house since March. I went over to my buddy Nathan's to watch the draft lottery in his basement with his dad Bobo, and we had a good time. Did you go anywhere special to take in the festivities?
Well, I was actually at home, but I was on a Zoom call with my friend, which was kind of nice. One of my friends lives down in Mississauga. So he was unable to be here with us, so we just decided to do a Zoom call. But yeah, it was exciting. It was nice to kind of have an event to look forward to, and it was nice to, like I said, it's not the most amazing results, but I'm kind of happy with it.
And like you said, 3 and 5 selections. Obviously, a lot of people were hoping for 1 and 2. Obviously, the odds weren't looking too good for that. Did you expect for us to come out with the first overall pick, or were you still disappointed when it came out as 3 and 5?
I originally said going in that we were going to get the second and fourth. That was my kind of prediction the whole time, that we were going to get the second and fourth pick. So I'm a little disappointed with 3 and 5, but now that I've had a couple days to kind of process it, I think it's really exciting still for Sens fans, because you have to think we're probably going to select in that number 3 spot either Stutzler or Byfield, who were 2 extremely exciting players, and Obviously, it'll all depend on what LA does with their picks. But, I mean, obviously you would have wanted to get number one, and I think whatever team is lucky enough to scoop up Lafreniere is going to be, extremely lucky in moving forward. And then whoever's lucky enough to scoop up either Stützle or Byfield is going to be extremely lucky. But, yeah, for the most part, it is kind of disappointing that you weren't able to get the first pick. But, after you get over that, you kind of have to be happy with where you are. I mean, considering where Detroit ended up falling to.
It is a very good draft year, so it's hard to get too upset when you look at 3 and 5, but of course Lafreniere has drawn such praise and was one of the first draft year players to ever win MVP at the World Juniors when Team Canada won gold this year. Do you think it might be worth looking as an option for the Sens to trade up to get that first overall selection, or is the draft too deep to give up one of the top 5 picks and another pick to move up?
See, this is the question I've been talking about all weekend with some of my friends, and for me, if you kind of have to think of, okay, what kind of price are we giving up? Are we just giving up the 3 and 5 picks, or are we going to have to throw something else in there? Ottawa has a very deep prospect pool, so it's not like if we were to give up a prospect as well in that kind of package deal, that it would be as huge a loss as, so let's say, a team like Detroit, who would have to, throw in quite a few prospects, which they don't even really have that many prospects compared to Ottawa. But I'm not quite sure. And, Lafreniere has just been so impressive to me. I'm a huge fan of the World Juniors, and I think that for guys to be impressive in the World Juniors, I think it really translates to the NHL because it's the biggest stage really before you get to the NHL. And you look at Connor McDavid's numbers in the World Juniors, and you kind of have to compare his to Lafreniere. And Lafreniere almost looked more impressive in the World Juniors than Connor McDavid did in his year. Obviously, Lafreniere had 2 years compared to McDavid's just 1, but I still think Lafreniere was such a pivotal player for Canada, probably the most important forward for them. And it was so scary when he got injured. I just remember just holding my breath and being so worried that when he went down. So I don't know, and you have to think about who Ottawa would take in that 5th pick if you're gonna think about trading up, because if the number 5 pick becomes somebody like, let's say, Marco Rossi or a defenseman, even if they ended up selecting Drysdale if he ever falls through there. I think you kind of have to think about that and whether or not it's more important to get, let's say you select Byfield at number 3 and Rossi. You kind of have to think about is Byfield and Rossi better than just Lafreniere on his own?
One thing that I was thinking about, because this was a tough question for me to come up with an answer for as well, is I was looking at some of the recent Cup champions and the teams who have been able to build dynasties such as the Penguins and the Blackhawks. They had multiple high draft picks like Sidney Crosby at first overall, Evgeny Malkin, and Marc-Andre Fleury, who was also first overall, and of course the Blackhawks, who had Kane and Taves in separate years. The Sens haven't had a top 5 pick since since Spezza in 2002. We had Zibanejad in 2011 at 6th overall. So, and then some of the other teams like the Blues, who they won 1 cup, they haven't had the top tier picks that the teams like the Blackhawks and Penguins have had. So you wonder if this could be the difference if we get a Lafreniere, if that could be a few cups for Ottawa in the unparalleled success that Eugene Melnyk has been talking about. So it's a tough call, but I've learned to trust Pierre Dorion, because even though we doubted him with the Brady Tkachuk pick over Sedina, he has proven himself to be a capable general manager. So whatever he ends up doing this year, I think I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Oh, 100%. And I've personally been, for the most part, trusting in Pierre Dorion, and I think for the moves that he has made, you have to go all the way back to 2017 when he picked up Alex Burrows. Obviously, it didn't quite work out for Ottawa in the end, but just to look at the way he loaded up for that 2017 playoff run, I think Victor Stahlberg was one of the more underrated pickups for the Ottawa Senators. He was so good in the 2017 playoffs, even though his numbers didn't really show. Even a guy like Wingles was kind of important to the Senators down the stretch. So I've been always trusting in Pierre Dorion. I personally, back when they selected Brady Tkachuk, was all in on him. I think his year at Boston College wasn't amazing leading into his draft year, so I think that's kind of why he had some of the doubters on him. But I wasn't 100% sold on Zadina, so I'm kind of happy that Brady's worked out in the way that he has. And then going back to your last question about, or to your last point about, teams that have kind of 3 or 4 superstar players and high picks, you got to think about Thomas Chabot and Brady Tkachuk in that mix as well, because those are 2 extremely talented players. Just look at their bodies of work this season, and then if you put some even more high-end talent up there, and you develop guys like Norris, like Formerton and Batherson, you almost have to think that keeping the number 3 and 5 picks is probably the better move, because like I said, you throw a guy in like Stützle or Byfield in there, and then you potentially throw a Marco Rossi or someone on D. And you think about Lassie Thompson coming up, you think about Brandstrom coming up, hopefully he can develop a little bit quicker, and then you've got some veteran guys. Hopefully Bobby Ryan can continue to turn it around, because I think he's going to be arguably the most important player for the Senators in the future, because if he can be that mentor to these young players and pretty much be one of those older leader guys that is going to lead this team into the, help lead this team into the future, I think, you got to think about those kinds of things. So, I think it's exciting to see what the Sens are going to be able to do with those number 3 and 5 picks, and it is definitely going to be interesting to see what Pierre Dorion has up his sleeve.
I love that you mentioned Bobby Ryan in there, because never forget playoff Bobby.
Oh, 100%. And I've been a guy that's always been on Bobby Ryan's side. I was so pumped when we first saw him. I mean, he's obviously been a little disappointing for the amount of money that he's making, but I had the chance to go to the game against the Vancouver Canucks this season where he scored a hat trick, and I've never felt overcome with emotions more in an NHL game than I did in that, and obviously he and all his teammates were as well. But it would be so nice and for Bobby Ryan if he were able to be a part of this team and potentially be a part of some success.
Moving past the Ottawa part of the draft lottery and looking at sort of the NHL side, there was a lot of discussion on social media about the outcome of the first overall pick going to a potential playoff team. What was your initial reaction when you found out that they had won the first overall pick?
I don't think I can use the exact words that I blurted out when I found out, but I think it's kind of ridiculous. I think that all of the lottery teams kind of got shafted because you think about a team that could potentially get him are the Pittsburgh Penguins, and if you add Alexis Lafreniere to Crosby and Malkin, what is that going to look like? Or if you add him to the Oilers, what is that going to look like? But there is also some teams in there that could benefit from getting Alexis Lafreniere. Look at potentially the Florida Panthers, although to me I think that would be probably the worst place for his career to end up in Florida. Don't mean that with any disrespect, but I just think, look at Aaron Ekblad and how he's gone about his career, hasn't been outstanding. Another team is the Columbus Blue Jackets. I think Columbus kind of deserves a superstar at this point with all the stars that have left in the last couple of years, but I think they've kind of given up a little bit of their talent and their prospects as well. So, I think, it is kind of interesting. I think that the lottery teams kind of got shafted, and they probably should have waited until after the playoffs were done. But, it is what it is at this point, and it'll be interesting to see who comes away with it. I think there are some teams that could definitely benefit from getting Alexis Lafreniere, even those bubble playoff teams.
Do you feel the NHL Draft Lottery is rigged in any way, shape, or form based on not only this year's results, but the previous years?
It's hard It's hard to say. I don't think. I mean, you kind of want to believe no, but I mean, there hasn't really been in the past years any like outrageous kind of results. I think the Oilers getting a lot of luck maybe has been a little outrageous, especially with McDavid. But I don't know. I personally say no, but that is definitely an interesting question to bring up.
I agree that it's not rigged in the terms that they pick the team that's going to win, because there's no way the NHL would want Edmonton with 4 first overall picks in a span of 5 years. However, I think that this year was specifically designed so that one of the non-playoff teams would win, because the 8 teams that were just based on a letter, they had a combined percentage chance of winning the lottery greater than that of the Detroit Red Wings and even the Ottawa Senators, who had the combined 25% chance. And I think that's because they want as many viewers to tune in when they have the phase 2 of the lottery after the play-in round. I think it's designed that way, and even in the past years, it's more so to get all the teams who wouldn't normally be in the draft lottery, like back when it used to be just 5 teams. Only the 5 teams who had a chance of winning the first overall pick would tune in. Nobody else would care. But then when you add those 8 extra team bases for teams who don't make the playoffs, you have a whole new audience. Even though it's not fair to the teams that really deserve the first overall pick, it's good for business for the NHL to do it the way that they are.
Yeah, the other thing that I had pointed out last weekend as well was, think about, some of those bubble playoff teams, if they were to get Lafreniere, like I said, like if let's say Edmonton does end up getting it, that could be great for business for the NHL, because you've got a pretty mega market team in the Edmonton Oilers. When Edmonton's playing really well, the city of Edmonton is great for the NHL. Same with the Montreal Canadiens. If he ends up somehow rolling to the Canadiens, I think that'd be amazing financially for the NHL, because that kind of brings in the entire province of Quebec, potentially some new fans as well, and when the Montreal Canadiens are playing well, it's always good for the NHL. So you could be right in that standpoint. I just think, I just personally think it should have been done after the playoffs, so that you could have known. Like, I have been mad if Montreal had gotten that pick and have not, gotten a chance to play in the playoffs. So you could be right, and it is kind of disappointing. And you have to think about those playoffs and how much of a question mark there's going to be in those play-in series, and legitimately how hard those teams are trying to win.
And I was going to ask you, I know you mentioned Columbus earlier, if there was one team you could pick that you would want to get the first overall pick, which team would it be?
Well, I definitely have to say Columbus, because you think about the fans of the Columbus Blue Jackets, what kind of they've gone through in the last couple of years, how exciting last year's playoffs were for them to be able to win, and then how every single one of those stars kind of bailed on them. Panarin, Bobrovsky, Duchesne, even Dzingel to a certain extent. It's kind of disappointing for them, and even still this year, they've had a fairly, impressive year considering the team that they have. I think if you put a guy like Alexis Lafreniere up front with some of the offensive weapons that they do have, and Zach Werenski on the back end as well, I think it's pretty exciting. And I think their goaltending is definitely exciting, and they're kind of an exciting team if you put Alexis Lafreniere on them.
I couldn't agree more with Columbus. I love their fans. They've got the whole thing going with the cannon when they score. I sort of started following them around the All-Star game a few years ago. I have a Nick Foligno Blue Jackets jersey, so I really love the team. And like you said, with all those players bailing last year and John Tortorella bringing the team together, I think that he's worthy of the Jack Adams this year for the way that Columbus has clawed their way up and could have even made the playoffs if the season hadn't shut down the way that it had. So I would love for their fans and for the team to be able to get the Lafreniere, like you said, they would be a good fit there. Is there a team that you want to win the first overall pick the least, which would upset you the most?
It has to be Toronto. For me personally, definitely Toronto. I think not only just because I'm a Sens fan, but also because they're playing Columbus in the first round, so that would mean they would have to lose to Columbus to be able to get that pick. But yeah, definitely Toronto. I just feel like he'd be wasted there. They don't really need any more offensive talent, and I think it would also kind of be bad for the Maple Leafs in a way, because then you have even more salary cap questions when his 3-year entry-level deal is up. I just think, as much as you hate to say it, you kind of want the Leafs to be good for the NHL as well. And it's exciting when both the Leafs and Sens are good. So, you know, if the Leafs continue on their path and you know, potentially pick up some more defensive prospects, I think that would be better off for them. And I think for every other fan, I think you wouldn't want to see the Leafs get the first overall pick.
I don't think I would be quite as upset if Toronto were to get it, just because it would be hilarious if they were able to mess this up even more. Like you said, they should look at adding defensive prospects, and I could absolutely see them not doing that under no justification. When they got Tavares, everybody was like, oh great, they can make a trade now and get a defenseman, and they still didn't until this year when they finally got Tyson Barrie, which didn't exactly work out, and he's also an unrestricted free agent after this year. So I would love to see them get him, only for it to continue to push their cap troubles and continue the demise of the team. I think that would be hilarious. Although the team that I would want to get him the least personally is Montreal, just because I'm a selfish Sens fan, and if we can't have him, then they definitely can't have him.
It would definitely be frustrating to see him not only in our division, but in a French-Canadian market, which for him he would probably excel in. So, you know, you'd probably kill the Senators in our division in Montreal. So you might be onto something there.
Now we're going to play a game. I had asked to come up with your mock top 5, and I love to think ahead here to whenever the draft may end up being, if it might be in October or November, and see if we can sort of paint a picture of what the Ottawa Senators' 2 top 5 picks might look like. I think it's safe to say Lafreniere is going to go number 1 on both of our mock 5. So should we start off with number 2 at LA?
Yeah, I think for me, this is probably the most difficult pick for me personally to make, because you got to think about, you know, what LA kind of needs, and I mean also think about the kind of player that Stützle is and the kind of player that Byfield is. Byfield's just been extremely impressive this season in the OHL, but I personally have to put Stützle there at number 2. I just think that there's no way that LA is going to end up passing on him.
I also have Stützle at number 2, based on the fact that they have Gabe Filardi, Alex Turcotte, Rasmus Kupari all down the pipeline at center ice, so it's hard to see them picking Quinton Byfield. If they don't pick Stützle, I could see them adding to the defense as well, but they also have Bjornfoot. I don't know how to pronounce that name, but they have Bjornfoot.
Yeah, I think it's Bjornfoot.
And Clegg, as well as Doughty, who meh. But LA thinks very highly of Doughty, so they're not going to think that he's on the downward spiral as much as every other fan base of every other team in the league thinks. But I could see them sneaking up and picking Drysdale, but I agree with you that they're going to go with Stützle, which opens the door for Ottawa to select at number 3.
I gotta go with Quinton Byfield. I think there is a lot of hype around him. I think he's gonna take a year or 2 to develop, and I mean, for Ottawa, they haven't had much luck drafting big centers in the first round. I don't know about, but yeah, I think you can't really pass up on the numbers that Quinton Byfield had. Just a terrific season, and you have to compare his numbers to Rossi's almost, and think about the support system that Rossi had versus the support system that Byfield had. Not to say that he did it all himself, but I think he did it himself more so than Marco Rossi did this year, and that's just extremely impressive considering how high up on the OHL scoring that he was. So yeah, you got to go with Byfield at number 3.
Another thing you gotta take into account when talking about Quinton Byfield is he's almost a full calendar year younger than Alexis Lafreniere, and he made the World Junior team as well this year. He wasn't as impactful, but during the first half of the season for Byfield in the OHL, he almost kept pace with Lafreniere's numbers in the queue. So I think that a year from now, when you're looking at Quinton Byfield, if he goes back to junior, if there is junior hockey this year, it's going to be no doubt that he's a great top 3 pick for Ottawa if they end up getting him at number 3.
I have to agree there, and to me, I think Byfield is such a good talent that you almost have to drop him at 3, and then 100% thinking about sending him to junior. Like, you can't have any questions about sending him to junior. If you're going to do it, because that extra year for him, just to be able to build some maturity, almost be a leader more so than he was this year. Play in the World Juniors if there is World Juniors, like you mentioned. Just get some confidence, so much more confidence, and the confidence that we saw from Alexis Lafreniere this year. And definitely, I think Byfield at number 3 is the most important pick for the Senators moving forward.
Now for one of the most tough choices to make at number 4, the Detroit Red Wings. I have a few friends who are Red Wings fans, and I've always liked the organization, so I was disappointed to see them fall all the way to 4, but they still have some options. And knowing that Steve Yzerman went off the board to select Moritz Seider last year, I wonder if he's going to go off the board again this year, or what he might be thinking. Who did you have him picking at number 4?
I actually have him going with Jamie Drysdale. I think Drysdale is the most impressive defenseman in this draft class. I think Detroit doesn't have a ton of depth on defense in their prospect line. I think just in general they don't have a ton of depth in their prospect line. But I think a guy like Drysdale will be extremely important to them. Detroit has always been a team that has been led by some quality defensemen. You think about Nicholas Lidstrom being one of them, probably one of the best defensemen in the history of the NHL. So, for Drysdale to be able to potentially go in and lead that team moving forward will be extremely important. And like I said, they do just have a little bit more depth prospect-wise at forward. And, there's a lot of top-end defensive talent in the top end of this draft. So, yeah, I just think for them, the ideal pick would be Drysdale.
I can't overstate enough how high I am on Jamie Drysdale, considering that he was the first ever 17-year-old defenseman to make Team Canada. And not only did he make the team, he dominated the World Juniors last year on the blue line for Canada. However, I was talking to a couple of Red Wings fans, and one of them said, considering they picked Seider last year, and they already think they have like 3 good prospects on the right-hand side, that they might go and look to add to forward with Holtz or Raymond, sort of like a player that you might consider taking like later on, like in the 5 to 10 range, as opposed to at 4th overall. But considering Yzerman took one of the European players last year in Seider, I could see him going with Holtz or Raymond, or also Rossi, just because I like Rossi as well. So, but I'm going to say that they take Holtz at 4th overall.
Yeah, I mean, Holtz is an impressive player as well. I was more so hoping that the Senators would potentially pick him at 5, depending on whether or not they get Stutzler or Byfield. Marco Rossi at 5 is kind of a stretch for the Senators. I don't really think he fits into what the Senators are kind of looking for in the future. I think they kind of need more wingers than they do centers. They've got a lot of centermen in development, and then you could always turn Brady Tkachuk into a centerman too. So, I was hoping Holtz would fall to 5, but he's a terrific player. Same with Raymond. So there's definitely options, lots of options for the Red Wings at 4.
For me at number 5, I took Drysdale. Me having the Wings select Holtz at number 4 was more of just optimism for the Sens themselves, because I love Drysdale so much, and like you said, like the amount of defensemen at the top of this draft, there's not too many options unless you go to Sanderson, although he might go in the teens somewhere. He's a left shot too, and we already have Shabbat and Brandstrom and Wolanin. But on the right side, I see a lot of comments on social media, a lot of Sens fans saying, don't pick a defenseman this year, which I disagree with, because, like you said, we have Norris, Batherson, Tkachuk up front, and if we add Stützle and Byfield, that's a very solid top 4 that you can build around and add pieces to, like Logan Brown, Vitaly Abramov, and players who dominated in the AHL this year. So I think that our forward group is actually looking stronger than at our defense, especially considering defense was our biggest weakness for each of the past 3 seasons. Jacob Bernard-Docker looks like a good prospect, as well as Lassie Thompson, but I don't think either of those 2 players compare to Drysdale, and if we can add him to our future top 6, I think that would be the best spot for him to go for Ottawa.
100%, and if Drysdale is on the board at 5, then I think you 100% have to pull the trigger on him at number 5. I think, like you said, just the way that he just commanded the blue line for Team Canada. I think as a whole, Team Canada's D in the World Juniors was just so strong. You look at even a guy like JBD, you look at Kevin Ball in that back end, and to think that Drysdale was arguably the most impressive defenseman out of all of those guys, I think is, just says so much about how good this kid is. I think he's just got that leadership and that commanding kind of presence, and he could be a guy that if the Senators do end up selecting, that you could see potentially being an alternate captain for a long time, kind of like Chris Phillips was for the Senators. And I think he would be definitely a no miss if you're the Senators at number 5. And if the Red Wings do end up taking him, then I think you kind of have to look at either Holtz or Raymond at number 5.
I've heard lots of good things about Holtz and Raymond as well. Either way you look at it, the Sens can't go wrong with 2 top 5 picks this year. Another event that took place last week was the Hall of Fame 2020 announcement. Going in this year, Jerome Mcginla, Marian Hossa, Kevin Lowe, Doug Wilson, Kim St. Pierre, and Ken Holland being named as the class of 2020. What were your thoughts on this class of inductees?
I hear very, very mixed reactions about this class. I think Jerome Mcginla is an obvious pick, as well as Marian Hossa. Jerome Mcginla, arguably one of the greatest NHL players of all time. I think probably one of the most underrated players of all time, considering how good he was. Could legitimately do it all. Kind of the 5-tool player, could hit, could kill penalties, could fight, but could also score. Scored 50 goals, was a great playmaker, one of the best captains in the early 2000s. He just was a beast, and you think about Calgary's playoff run in 2004, how much of a monster he was for them. Him and LeCavalier, the battles that they had in the Stanley Cup Finals, and then moving forward, I think he's a no-miss pick. Same with Marian Hossa, another just a monster that earlier on in his career was a speed and skill guy, but was able to kind of become almost that big body type, and was able to grind it out and use his speed and skill as well, and impressive that he was able to win 3 Stanley Cups after losing 2 straight with Detroit and Pittsburgh. Just the funniest thing. That was one of the funniest things to me, the fact that he went from Detroit and Pittsburgh and lost both of those. But I was really happy for him to be able to be inducted, the first drafted Ottawa Senator to go into the Hockey Hall of Fame. So that's really excited. But then you look at the other two guys that were inducted in Kevin Lowe and Doug Wilson, I think that there was potentially some other names that could have gone ahead of those, and unfortunately the way that I think they were selected has to be due to the fact that they had a lot of Stanley Cup success, and especially a guy like Kevin Lowe, who wasn't necessarily that number one type of guy on the Oilers, and really didn't stand out numbers wise. I think same with Doug Wilson, although I think there's a lot of defensemen that kind of get overlooked when it comes to time to Hockey Hall of Fame. But for me personally, I think that those two guys, they have been kind of a reach to be inducted. Think about Kim St. Pierre. That's a terrific pick. The most outstanding women's goalie I personally have ever seen. She was unbelievable, terrific goaltender. And then Ken Holland, with the work that he had done with the Detroit Red Wings, I think is a terrific pick. And hopefully he can turn around for the Oilers in the near future.
I agree with most of your thoughts there. The only one I'm going to disagree with is I do think Doug Wilson was very deserving, as he put up 800 points as a defenseman, and you don't see that very often at all. And he's been waiting 30 years almost now to get in, so I'll agree with him going in this year. Among other players that I thought should have deserved the call, you've got Mcginla. I think that Theo Fleury is one player who could also go in and deserve to have been in for a while now, as he was the first elite small player in the NHL, won a Stanley Cup as a rookie, so he has the accolades, and he was one of the first players to speak out against abuse by former coaches, so I give him a ton of credit for his career. And I think those are a few players that could go in next year. So I was going to ask you if you thought that you said Marian Hossa being the first Senators draft pick of all time to be inducted. Is there another former Sens draft pick that you think could have gone in?
100%. I think obviously you have to think about the Senators fan bias, but 100%. I don't think you can overlook Albertson's body of work and just how important and impactful he was to the Ottawa Senators. You think about where they were when he was drafted versus where they were when he left the team, and all of the work that he did in the middle. Definitely the most important player in the franchise's history, the best leader. I think one of the best leaders in the entire NHL for a long time. If not the best leader in the NHL for a little while there. And so definitely it's disappointing to see that Daniel Alfredsson, not only did he not get in, but I heard on an interview with Pierre Maguire that he really didn't get that many looks from any of the panel. So it is definitely disappointing.
You wonder, because I hear a lot of people saying Alfie, he definitely had a Hall of Fame career, but you see how long it takes some of these players to get in, especially Wilson and Lowe, who have been waiting since the 80s and 90s to get in. You wonder if Alfie could turn into be another one of those players. Do you have any predictions for the class of 2021 who will be going in, and how long do you think it will take us to see Alfredsson in the Hall of Fame?
It's interesting you say that, because think about a guy like Theo Fleury. I was kind of surprised he didn't get in this year too. I think he's kind of been overlooked. It's always difficult because you got to think about the kinds of guys like Lowe and Wilson, who have, like you said, have been waiting for a while. But then you also think about kind of the newer players that have gone in. You can't really get trapped into that recency bias. So for me, I think the Hall of Fame is one of the most difficult things to be able to predict. But for Alfredsson's standpoint, I think either next year or the year after, I think he'll definitely get a good shake at it.
Following the draft on Friday night, the draft lottery, I should say, the Ottawa Senators announced their new Sens on Demand initiative, which when I first read about it, I thought it was very insignificant. But after thinking about it some more, I've read between the lines and have my own theory. I don't know if you have looked too much at the Sens on Demand yet, if you've had the chance to check that out yet.
I haven't really gotten a ton of chance to check it out. I did kind of see, some of the things that they were thinking about doing. I like you said, kind of at first glance, I was like, that's kind of an insignificant thing. But I mean, you do have to kind of give credit to them at a time where not necessarily desperate to get fans, but I think the fans kind of are, not necessarily in a position where they're going to be potentially buying the team. But I mean, you kind of got to do, what you need to. Desperate times almost call for desperate measures.
Absolutely. So after reading what they said, I jotted down some notes just so I could explain to any of the listeners who haven't had the chance to check it out yet. They announced the new ticket initiative, which includes, from my understanding, you can purchase a pro membership valued between $600 and $1,200, a top line membership between $2,500 and $5,000. The All-Star package for $10,000 or the $20,000 MVP option. So all of these are way out of my price range, but for the die-hard season ticket holders, you can redeem tickets for any game at any time you want as long as you have that value on your account. So it sounds pretty creative. They must have dug deep to come up with this, and you also get 20% off at the concession and Sens store and save money on Parkit, and you get access to exclusive season seat member events. So it seems like a good idea, and the one thing that I gather the most from this is when you try and get as much money as you can up front, it seems to me like a good thing to do before potentially selling the team. So if anything, nothing else to take from this, that can be some excitement for Sens fans that this is probably like a 5% chance that maybe Melnyk is doing this before selling the team.
I mean, it's funny you mentioned that because I was also thinking about this and talking with my older brother. My older brother was born in 1989, grew up with the Sens, is a diehard Sens fan, and has kind of been completely 100% out on the Senators. And he was really excited that the Senators didn't get the first overall pick because it meant that Melnyk was going to potentially have to scramble to do more to be able to make some money, and it could potentially push him to sell the team. And I think them really seeing the Sens on demand at the time that they have kind of is funny, and it's a bit of a coincidence, you think, them releasing it, and it's kind of funny, at the time that they're doing it just because, they didn't end up getting the first overall pick. I think they got the first overall pick. It would have been huge for the franchise, potentially kind of, gain some fans with being able to select Lafreniere. So I almost have to agree with you. Kind of seems like a way to make as much money as possible, but while still selling as many tickets as possible as well.
One thought I had before looking into what it was, because I was way more focused on the draft lottery itself Friday night than the announcement. And when I saw before the draft lottery that they were going to be making the announcement on what Sens On Demand was, I thought, what could this possibly be? And one thought that ran through my mind was, I've always thought it would be amazing for the fans if the NHL had a subscription service where you could rewatch old NHL games, not only from this season, I know on the NHL website you can watch any game from this season itself for free, but from previous seasons as well. So to be able to go back to 2007, watch the entire playoff run, or watch Erik Karlsson's debut in the 2009-10 season, and just to be able to watch some old games. The UFC has their entire fight library on Fight Pass, and the WWE has every pay-per-view on the WWE Network. Would this be something that you would be interested in all, and do you think that this would ever be possible for the NHL to come out with?
I think it is. I don't think necessarily that the NHL has to kind of milk every ounce of money quite like the UFC or the WWE does. You have to think about the following of the UFC, and the WWE is kind of more of a niche following versus the NHL, but I think it would be terrific if they ever did come out with something like that. I think I personally would be extremely interested in it. I love being nostalgic and going back and watching old games. But at the start of quarantine, that's pretty much all I was doing, was going back and trying to rewatch as many old Senators games as I could. So 100% I'd be all in on that kind of thing.
The only problem that I could see with that is the rates to the games, but like the NHL has the center ice package, so I don't know what percentage of the games like they own or what the broadcasts they own, considering they do so many games on NBC as well and TSN in Canada. So I don't know if it would be possible, but it's an idea that I like, and if they ever come out with anything like that, I'll take a lot of credit for it.
Yeah, I think it's extremely, kind of interesting kind of idea. I think that there hasn't really been something like that, other than the UFC or the WWE. There aren't really a ton of sports that do get into that. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting kind of idea to float around.
And you said you do enjoy Sens nostalgia, so that brings us to my favorite part of the show, reliving our favorite Senators memories. Are you ready to take a trip down memory lane?
Oh, let's go for it.
Do you remember the first Sens game you went to?
So my dad and I had season tickets to the Senators pretty much as early as I can remember. I don't necessarily remember the first game, but I know in 2003 and 2004 my dad had half-season tickets, and we used to always go. And the one game that always stands out to me, January 24th, I had to look up the date, 2004, the Senators played the Rangers, and the Senators beat them 9-1. I just remember as a kid being like so ecstatic that the Sens were just absolutely dominating. As a 6-year-old kid, you can't really have too many teams that you hate, but for some reason I hated the Rangers back in the day, and we just absolutely dominated. And I remember in the third period, Otto had scored with about a minute, maybe 50 seconds left, and for the entire minute, the fans were all chanting, "We want 10." That's just something that's always a memory that's always stood out for me, and really one of the most exciting games. I think anytime your team can win by that margin when you're a young kid, I think it's extremely exciting.
Do you have any favorite short tenured Senators, as in a player who's played less than 200 games with the team?
That's a great question, and when you sent me the kind of list before, I was having a hard time coming up with it. To me, I think I would have liked to seen what Matt Duchene could have done a little bit more with the Ottawa Senators. Obviously, he was outstanding in his time here, and I just think it wasn't the right time to have Matt Duchene, and for us to be able to get what we did out of the Duchene and Dzingel trades. I think you 100% have to pull the trigger. But another guy kind of that I was thinking about was Alashensky. I think we kind of had him at a weird time in the franchise's history. I think he could have potentially made more of a difference. And then another guy, like I had mentioned earlier, Victor Stahlberg. I think it was kind of disappointing to see him kind of fall off after the 2017 playoffs. But for me personally, I think I have to go with Matt Duchene as my favorite short-tenured center.
What is your favorite all-time Senators memory?
Favorite all-time Senators memory. So that's a tough one. I personally, I think I got to go back to right before that season, the season that my dad had gotten the half-season ticket. So right before the 2003-2004 season, the Senators held an event at Mini Golf Gardens on Maryville Road, and it was kind of a meet and greet with the Senators, and Spartacat was there. Spartacat had signed my jersey, and then later we ended up getting to meet Zdeno Chara as well. And my dad definitely still has a picture of me as a tiny little kid on Zdeno Chara's lap, and that's how much significantly bigger he was than me. But yeah, I think that's got to be one of my best memories for sure.
I always ask everyone if they had met any players, but I forgot to send you that one, so I was thinking I might be catching you off guard with that question, but you hit the 2-for-1 there. Is there any other players you've met before, or even a celebrity?
Yeah, so I've met I met Bobby Ryan a couple times at the brew table and just at other bars too. I met him at Crazy Horse one time too. Was a great guy. I think it's very nice to see him kind of turn things around. But I will always tell this story, and this will be one of my funniest stories of the time I met Ryan Dzingel. So the Weeknd, very popular artist, was performing in Ottawa when I was working for Hot 89.9, and at the time we were set up before the event, but during the Weeknd's concert, we actually had some time to go into Stanley's and to kind of relax before the end of the concert. We weren't allowed to go into the concert, but we were allowed to stay in the restaurant area, and I had noticed Dzingel at the bar and had kind of waved to him once, because I mean, when you're just a fan, I think there's a lot of times where you get caught staring, but I'd waved to him, so I knew that he had noticed me, and then I ended up going into the bathroom, and as I was doing my business at the urinal, he came into the bathroom and slapped me in the bottom and said, "What's up, man?" And we ended up chatting in the bathroom of Birch Bar at the Canadian Tire Center. It was right after the Sens had been eliminated from the 2017 playoffs, so we were kind of chatting about that, and just seemed like a nice regular guy. Obviously, he's not that much older than me, so it was nice to get chatting, and I think he definitely had some alcoholic beverages in him. And then at the end of the night, when he was leaving, he said one goodbye to me, gave me an autograph. We took a picture together, and then everyone that I would work with at Hot 89.9 was kind of freaking out with me as well, like, "Oh my gosh, he said bye to you, that's awesome, took a picture." But yeah, that's definitely one of my favorite stories for meeting an Ottawa Thunder.
That's awesome. I love Dzingel. I wish that things would have worked out better for him in Ottawa, but he was one of the players we traded away last season. I was considering getting his jersey. That's how much I liked him, given his speed, and that he seemed to have so much success early on in his rookie season too. So I liked him as soon as he suited up, and so I do love Dzingel. That's an awesome story. Thank you for sharing that one.
Yeah, he was one of my favorite players as well. I think the future may have been brighter for him if Ottawa had been able to be more successful, but for sure, I think it was kind of disappointing, but it's nice to see him playing fairly well in Carolina as well.
And finally, who should episode 9 of the Unparalleled Success Podcast be named after? There's a couple of good options for number 9.
Yeah, this was funny, and this is probably the one I spent the most time on, and trying to justify it. I've narrowed it down to 2. I've got it between Bobby Ryan for obvious reasons, one of my favorite players. It's funny that he ended up switching back to number 9 when Milan Michalek left, but another guy was Havlat, and to me the early Sens Havlat was not necessarily underrated, but was kind of overlooked due to how good the Senators were when they had Spezza, Heatley, Hossa, Alfredson, of course. So I had a hard time picking between Havlat and Bobby Ryan, but I think I got to go with Martin Havlat.
I like that. I remember when Havlat's career was winding down in St. Louis, I think it was, I was vouching like, hey, what if we give this guy like a one more chance in Ottawa when he was on waivers? I was thinking it would be fun to bring him in for one last run that year, because it was like 2016 and we weren't going to make the playoffs. So it was either him or Scott Gomez, and I would have rather to have Havlat come back for the final stretch there.
It's funny you mentioned that. I was definitely thinking about that as well. I was thinking about mentioning that as well. But yeah, I definitely remember when that happened, being disappointed that we ended up taking a shot on Scott Gomez, just due to the fact Havlat had a little bit more success than Gomez had in the last couple of seasons.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. I look forward to September. Hopefully the Junior A hockey will start back up and we'll get to call some Raiders games together.
Yeah, I'm excited for it as well. I think it'll be an interesting season for the Raiders for sure.
Right on. Thanks for coming on and take care.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Peugeot. First round pick, Nason, Silverberg for Ryan, McCulloch, Kovalev, California road trips, Lalim, Hasek, Gerber, carousel of goalies. Buddy Robinson, Ben Harper, Bobby Ryan, Spartacat, Boro, Hoffman, LeBreton is a no-go. Elliot, Anderson, Alex Aldis back again. Dorian says, we're a team, someday we will win the cup. We didn't start the rebuild. It was always brewing since 2009. We didn't start the rebuild. No, we didn't start it, but this time we've got it.